Tensions continue to spiral in the Korean Peninsula, and North Korea claims it has conducted a test of its underwater nuclear weapon system. Test of the HAL 523 system, a name Pyongyang has given to its nuclear-capable underwater attack drones, was carried out in the waters off its east coast. And in a statement, a North Korean military spokesperson flagged hostile military maneuvers off the navies of the US and its allies. And Pyongyang's drone is named HAL, a Korean word which means tidal waves or tsunamis. And as per the state media KCNA, the new drone system is intended to make sneak attacks in enemy waters and destroy naval strike groups and major operational ports by creating a large radioactive wave through an underwater explosion. The Kim Jong-un regime is showing off its increasingly diverse nuclear threats to Washington and Seoul. Pyongyang bangs on silos, rail cars, submarines and road mobile missile launchers and is now adding the underwater nuclear drone to the mix. North Korea intends to signal to US and South Korea that in a war, the potential vectors of nuclear weapons delivery that the allies would have to worry about and target would be vast. However, analysts are skeptical about whether the underwater nuclear weapon system is ready for deployment. It is unclear whether North Korea has fully developed miniaturized nuclear warheads that are needed to fit on its smaller weapons. And this week, the navies of South Korea, US and Japan staged three-day joint drills until Wednesday, alongside the US aircraft carrier Carl Vinson. Now, the allies say that they are going all out to improve their responses to nuclear-armed North Korea's threats. And now for more on this, we are being joined by Professor Tilman Roof, who is the board member of International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. He joins us live from Melbourne. Welcome to the broadcast, Professor Roof.
Thanks very much.
Well, I begin with my first question. Now, while we know that North Korea has shown similar patterns of testing, however, what could be a cause of concern is that little is known about these weapons or their claimed performance. Now, where do you think that the recent underwater nuclear weapon system stands, and how powerful or lethal is it as opposed to their nuclear ballistic missiles?
We don't really know yet. Certainly, these tests, which began last year, North Korea claimed to have conducted 2 tests last year, and this is the first already so early in this year. They say provoked by the, as they perceive them, very aggressive military exercises that continue on a regular basis between the US, Japan and South Korea. But it's difficult to observe much detail about these underwater drones. We essentially rely on video information that North Korea provides, and they of course have a long history of very bombastic rhetoric and very aggressive rhetoric, but they also have a history of, for an impoverished backward state, a rather impressive history of nuclear developments. And if this drone isn't ready yet, I don't doubt that it might be in a year or two. The Russians are the only other country that has a similar weapon in development. In the Russian case, it's called Poseidon, and it's actually powered by nuclear power. So it has the double danger of both a nuclear reactor on board as well as a nuclear warhead, intended to be able to travel over very large distances and potentially put cities and ports at great risk. Really, a weapon that violates international humanitarian law, which prohibits the specific targeting of civilians. Whether the North Koreans are sort of emulating the Russian example, potentially with Russian assistance, is quite possible, but they're clearly continuing to work on a range of delivery systems for nuclear weapons via various missiles. They're also reported to be developing submarine capacity. So this is very much in keeping with that. And given the level of commitment to the nuclear program as a kind of regime insurance policy for their survival, their determination is likely to be reflected in technical success at some point.
Yes, and Professor Roof, North Korea's counter-tests have increased in the last year. And just this week, leader Kim Jong-un also declared that South Korea, and I'm quoting here, as the principal enemy. So Kim Jong-un declared South Korea as the principal enemy. So where do you think the situation is headed now? And what should the world, especially US and South Korea, expect out of this?
Well, of course, nuclear saber rattling on the Korean Peninsula is nothing new, and unfortunately goes through ebbs and flows and has been present for a long time. That is no cause for complacency. There are multiple nuclear flashpoints potentially around the world, in the Ukraine crisis, and now, of course, within Israel's nuclear weapons involved in a war in the Middle East that shows signs of spreading beyond Israel and Gaza. Of course, the continuing tensions in South Asia between India and Pakistan, between India and China. So there are multiple potential flashpoints around the world. The Korean Peninsula remains one of the most festering and poorly addressed. And I think the most simple way to really gauge the depth of that failure to resolve those long-standing tensions is that the Korean War, which finished in the mid-1950s, is still technically suspended by armistice and not by formal peace agreement. There is much unfinished diplomatic business to make all of the countries in the Northeast Asian region more secure. And of course, in the end, we will only all be more secure once the spectre of nuclear confrontation is removed from all of us by the nuclear-armed states, the 9 of them finally getting serious about their obligation to disarm these terrible weapons.
Yes. On that note, Professor Roof, thanks for joining in and thanks for sharing your insights on this broadcast. Thank you for your time.
Many thanks for having me.